You're listening to the Valley Current.
Jack?
You're looking youthful.
Youthful or useful?
Youthful and useful, both.
Good.
Elon Musk got sued again today. He needs a whole law firm to manage his litigations.
He got sued. I read quickly his case against Altman Freed.
Yeah.
Bankman or whatever it was. It's an interesting idea. Fiduciary duty, charitable contribution.
Right.
Standing. Does he have standing? I guess so. We'll see where that goes.
I have to say, between Trump and him, it's just such a full docket of activities. I don't remember a time in the last 40 plus years when the news is so much about federal or state or other litigation. I just don't remember it. I mean, I don't know how law schools can teach students without basically saying, take the newspaper out every morning, right?
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. We need to think some more about the role of law, its purpose, and things like that.
Right. I mean, it's an amazing period of time in America. Supreme Court today came out with a ruling in the Colorado case.
Which was no surprise.
No surprise, but interestingly short per curiam opinion, 20 pages, with kind of a concurrence by the liberal flank and a sort of an explanation that, look, this is the right outcome. We're not sure about the reasoning. But our view is we have to basically be able to have a national election without 50 different states doing 50 different things, which I think is correct, right? But
no, I'm not sure it is correct.
Really? Tell me more.
Well, suppose every state had a different idea. You know, what's wrong with that? That's the way it was in the beginning. And why couldn't it be that way again? What's so terrible about it?
Well, the view is that you've got this national urgency to have a single president as opposed to multiple presidents, or to have sort of a single approach to an election. Now, maybe the German system of having many different players all involved in one fashion or another in kind of a coalition government, maybe that's got to come to America. But the current system is pretty binary, unfortunately.
No, I don't oppose the binary idea, but what's wrong with having each state decide whether Trump or any other candidate can be on the ballot? What's wrong with that?
Well, then you don't get the ability to have a national election where everyone's vote counts, because in Colorado, you wouldn't be able to vote for Trump, and you might want to do that, right?
Well, you might want to, but yeah, then you have to move states. Anyway, that's the way they've settled it now. And I'm not terribly disappointed about it or anything like that.
I think people predicted it. What they didn't predict is that it would be effectively a unanimous per curiam decision with no wicked defense or dissent at all. Jackson asked some questions. People thought maybe she, as the newbie on the court, would really raise a stink about this, but she didn't.
No, but they objected to the idea that only an act of Congress can solve the problem.
Right.
And they wanted to leave that issue open.
Right.
So that's okay. No, that was all right. The immunity case is coming up with argument on April 28th, right?
I know, and people think the Supreme Court should have expedited that even more. I don't know how that briefing would work. It would put a lot of pressure on lawyers, but of course, people say at the time that big fight with the Florida vote count, they did expedited briefing over a week or less than a week.
Bush v. Gore.
Right?
Yeah, but also I was of the view that they didn't have to take the case, because if it turned out that he had immunity and was convicted, they could overturn it on appeal.
Right.
So what was the reason for taking the case now?
I guess the view is he's got this ability to test immunity at some level in a way that clarifies. And I think they've got to go in the direction of you just don't have absolute immunity.
Did you read the opinion of the Court of Appeal?
Yeah, I thought it was well done. I thought the D.C. Circuit took too long to get to it, but ultimately I thought they did a pretty good job.
they did a good job and sort of outlined his reasoning, his justifications, none of which were persuasive to them.
I
So
mean,
I think it was a good result. I don't expect the Supreme Court to disagree with it,
I don't know
but
how they do it. I mean, if they do it, it's going to really raise questions about the legitimacy of the court. That's for sure.
correct, correct.
And people are concerned about that. I mean, people are concerned that to some degree, it really is like, wow, what else can happen in this country? To what degree will this country basically become very, very challenging for any new politicians? Because I don't know who would run for office that wouldn't be concerned about, I'm going to be in massive litigation in one form or another. And that seems to be the way the world is going. Like disputes don't get resolved outside of court. They only get resolved maybe in court.
Maybe,
Maybe.
not always.
Right.
Yeah.
Not always, right?
Yeah.
At some level, I'm very worried that the court system itself can't handle the volume of these cases. And I don't know what it will ultimately mean to how federal judges look at their role, because maybe they would say, you know what, this has become too politicized. Certainly in DC, that's probably always been true, but even throughout
Maybe.
to some degree. I'm just wondering at some level, who becomes a judge these days? Who becomes a politician? Who's willing to run for office? Who's willing to run for president?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't really have a great slate of candidates.
No. And I'm very, Biden should resign. I'm very convinced of it. He did a good job. He should step down. Just because you do a good job doesn't mean you have to run for re-election.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think at this point, the real question ultimately is going to be, does the court do the right thing on this immunity question fast enough to actually theoretically allow for a trial before the election? I just don't know if the time will end up working or not.
I'm very irritated with Merrick Garland for taking 2 years to hire Jack Smith.
Right.
I think that was a big mistake, and I don't understand it.
Yeah, I don't understand it either. And I guess at some point there'll be some tell-all book that explains what's going on.
Yeah. Are you going to write it?
You have to give Trump some credit. I mean, the guy is not a young person anymore, but he's dealing with a hail of machine gun bullets coming his way that most people would wilt and would say, you know what, this is not for me. His chief financial officer just pled to perjury.
Yeah, that's weird.
After being in jail in Rikers Island, which is not a great place. I come from New York City. Rikers Island is not the best place to end up being imprisoned.
Right.
And he's probably going to go back there for a while at 76 years old.
Weissenberg, right?
Yeah, it's an amazing story. I mean, whoever writes the movie, I've been saying this for a while. I mean, you live in movie land in Southern California. Whoever gets to do the movie is going to have such a great time doing it. It's going to be an amazing movie, I'm sure. And to some degree, the question is it too complicated? Someone will have to try to simplify it.
It's true. And then we've got the Israel-Gaza war. That's a huge upsetting thing.
We got two, if not three, parallel wars going on.
Where's the third one?
Well, the third one is that China keeps invading Taiwan's airspace. And the Taiwanese used to push back. Now the Taiwanese are like letting it happen. And to some degree, the question is, are they sort of being intimidated? And my read of it is the U.S. has more or less said, we're not going to fight that war. And we're going to let that go, but we're going to move all the technology and all the brain power of Taiwanese out of that country. And we're going to leave that place barren for any semiconductor manufacturing. So all these companies like Taiwan Semiconductor, they're all relocating. And the choke point that could exist is being eliminated in the semiconductor field. Now, whether it can happen fast enough to make a difference, It's hard to read, but
Hard to read.
that's probably a bigger risk, frankly, than either Ukraine or Gaza for the American economy. Because if the Chinese were to cut off supply of semiconductors from Taiwan, a lot of products would not ship in the US. A lot of automotive products would not ship. A lot of computer products would not ship. A lot of stuff would fail. It really is a big choke point. And there's kind of a chip war that's going on. It's been documented in a number of books and stories where Chinese want access to technology. The US does not want to give it. And the Chinese are pushing back, saying, well, you know what? We can take over China probably in 30 days or less. Of course, Putin thought he would take over Ukraine in 30 days or less.
Yeah, but this is different. This is different.
It's different. And just to give you a laugh, my dad had, because he was a Navy guy, he had a DVD with the history of aircraft carriers. And as a joke, I actually found the DVD player to watch the DVD, which tells a long history of how America built up its Navy fleet of aircraft carriers. And a lot of it allowed dominance in the Second World War. And a lot of it still allows dominance. And the question is there enough dominance to actually cover what could be a multi-front situation for the US? Like literally something that has many, many fronts to it. And at some point, you just run out of aircraft carriers and other weaponry to do any sort of US worldwide policing. And I don't know what happens when that is ultimately shown. Do we lose credibility, sort of like the way?
Yes.
Yeah,
We're losing credibility anyway. I mean, I think the policy in Ukraine, I'm sympathetic with Ukraine and I hate Putin, but the US policy was not rational, in my opinion. You can't just give weapons, ammunition. You have to either go there or not go there. And it's good. They're going to lose. They're going to run out.
Well, at some level, that's the bet that Putin made. And so far, he's been pretty persistent.
Yeah, and he's been right. He's been right. And, Europe is giving aid, but it's just not enough.
Well, at some level, the Europeans play kind of both sides of this because they do business.
They do business with
right?
Russia. Yeah.
I mean, it's an amazing story in some ways. And I don't know where or how it plays out in the long run. It seems like a lot of waste of both human beings.
I think war is really, when you look at the pictures, it's just ridiculous. What's the point of it? So he wins Ukraine. Ukraine is a garbage heap at that point.
Right.
What's the point?
Right.
And Gaza, same thing. I'm very upset about Israel and Gaza. I don't like Netanyahu, never have. But, and of course, Hamas's behavior on October 7th, if it was Hamas, it was not totally unprovoked because Israel has been abusing Palestinians since the beginning. But there has to be a better response, and I don't know what it is. Really don't.
So do you think this is sort of the world devolving at some level? I mean, you're an expert on fiduciary duty. It seems like none of the leaders understand fiduciary principles from a global point of view.
Well, fiduciary from a global point of view is a questionable idea in the first place. Fiduciary duty is basically a private thing.
Right.
I know they don't understand fiduciary duties, but what's more important is they've got this, to me, diseased notion of national sovereignty and boundaries. I dream of a world where there are no boundaries. And people can just go wherever they want. The nation state has responsibilities to take care of the territory that it occupies. But it doesn't have the right to exclude people from that territory, I think. Still thinking about it.
Well, there's been a lot of movement, including a lot of movement out of California, a lot of movement, frankly, by very wealthy people out of the United States entirely. And sort of a lot of movement where you could say immigrants are moving from poverty centers illegally to places where they can basically be under the radar and do better than staying in a poverty center.
Right.
And that seems to be like, if you really put it in perspective, the big worry is the immigration problem will grow radically over time.
Right.
In a way that really does change the character of multiple nations that can absorb whatever talent and lack of talent makes its way into a country, right?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether it can't absorb. Why can't it absorb? I mean, if the opportunities are there, why can't they be exploited by immigrants?
Well, that was the nation that existed in the early 1900s for sure, because my grandparents came in from Italy, and they were honest people, and they worked hard, and they grew their wealth over time in ways that they could never have grown their wealth in Italy. That played out for the Irish, that played out for Eastern Europeans, that played out for lots and lots of different waves of immigrants.
Right.
Whether it can play out in the 21st century is the unknown question here, right?
We'll have to see. We'll have to see.
But it puts a lot of pressure on the courts. It puts a lot of pressure on government. It puts a lot of pressure on even individual towns, because they have a hard time dealing with new people that are not welcomed, and that could actually end up being fought against in a way that you would say was the history of blacks in the South, right? Where it's like a second-class non-citizen in some ways. So it's such a challenging time. I was wondering how people teach law classes these days. Every day there's some new newspaper article about a breaking decision that affects constitutional law in a big way. And you could make a case book just out of all the Trump litigation. I'm sure someone will do that at some point.
Yes.
Just to talk about what the modern president and the modern candidate for president has to be ready for, particularly if they're a business person and they have a history of being a super aggressive business person that pushes the envelope or bends the rules or breaks the rules. And all the above, right?
Yep.
So I don't know how that guy gets a good night's sleep. I don't know how Biden gets a good night's sleep either from that point of view. I really don't. It seems to be quite a challenge.
I agree. It's a problem.
Thanks, Rafael. Talk to you again. Stay in tune.
Will do.
Decisions that will be happening, I'm sure, and quickly.
I'm sure.
All right. See you later.
Jack.
Bye-bye.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.